Welcome again to this series of videos on systems engineering where we're going through design and testing of an Arduino-based system. Today we're going to look at writing the requirements document. But let's review where we are. We started by defining our enterprise and the stakeholders in that enterprise and the problem they face and how that problem affects them. We came up with metrics so we could define areas of improvement. Finally, we defined their problem and came up with a needs statement. We then created our ConOps paper, where we described a device or system whose features could solve the problem. By making an activity diagram, we showed how our device would be used and the features it had so that when used properly, it would take inputs from the stakeholder's environment, do some functions, and then produce outputs that would alleviate the problem. It would fill the need in the need statement. But the whole idea of a ConOps paper leaves the system details vague, as if we're simply talking about a black box that has inputs, processes, and outputs. This leads us to writing our requirements document. This is where we define our contractual obligation to the client. We give the engineer a target they must build to, thereby reducing the development time and cost. We can define a base, once the engineers know what they have to build, they can tell us how much they think it will cost and how long it'll take, so we can define a baseline for project costs and schedules. And then finally, we can, from our requirements, we can start to define a test plan to verify we have met our contractual obligations. So how do we start writing our requirements document? Let's start with what the system has to do, okay? These are what we call the mission requirements. We said earlier in the ConOps paper, it had to be wearable. So, mission requirement is, system shall be mountable on backpack. We said it has to alert the user when they are approaching a threshold of force. So, system shall alert user when backpack forces exceed a threshold that will have a cumulative effect on user. We said it has to measure those vertical acceleration forces. So, system shall measure vertical accelerations. Systems shall estimate forces generated by mass times vertical acceleration of backpack. We have to let the user determine what those thresholds are. So, system shall allow user to set thresholds for alerting. And we said the trainer and the user will be able to analyze the data. So, system shall collect and store vertical acceleration data, and system shall collect and store threshold alerts. Now that we have what the system is supposed to do, we can further refine those mission requirements into design or functional requirements, which describes how the system is going to meet those requirements. It's a good practice to start numbering your requirements so they can be traced back to the mission requirements. As an example, I'm going to number our requirement that it be mountable as MR1. Then define what those refined requirements are as DR1.1, 1.2, so on and so forth. Notice again how the mission requirement describes what it has to do, and the design requirements will say how it will do it. Okay, so MR1, system shall be mountable on backpack. How is it going to do that? Okay, system shall use a Velcro fastening system to attach to equipment. System shall not weigh more than 0.25 kilograms. System size shall be no more than 10 centimeters by 6 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Okay, so now as an exercise, if you want to, you can go through each one of the other mission requirements and come up with your own design requirements. And go ahead and pause and try that out. And then when you come back, I will show you what I have. Okay, so here's the other design requirements for the rest of the mission requirements. Okay, here's a few pointers when writing requirements. The requirements should have quantifiable, measurable criteria in them. The requirements should be written so that they could be tested. Requirements should be short, one sentence. And requirements should only talk about one thing per requirement. Okay? Also, your terminology should be consistent. The word shall means a binding requirement that must be tested and verified. So that'll have to show up on your test plan. Words like will describe a statement of fact or purpose. Should or may describes a non-binding attribute of the system. Doesn't have to be in the test plan. Must can also describe a mandatory requirement, or it can be used to express a constraint. So make sure that your terminology is consistent. Okay? So I hope these tips help you in writing your requirements document. Okay? Bye.